All right, so it's box. B&R happened today. It's after modern with the boys tonight, and a couple people asked me whether or not I was going to enforce the B&R announcement. I told them yes, of course. I would enforce the new B&R announcement. For anybody that didn't see the market go absolutely crazy today on Ardent Please, or the B&R announcement hit, Violent Outburst got banned out of Modern. That is one of only two changes, and it's the only one that I'm really going to talk about, because the other one was a vintage restricted adjustment, and I don't know if anybody... Like, to me, it matters to me because I play vintage, but there's not a lot of people who play vintage. The Violent Outburst banning is not surprising to me, but it is surprising to me when it happened. Seeing as how we have Thunder Junction coming in a couple of weeks, and then we have Modern Horizons 3 coming in a matter of months, I think the format is going to get enough of a shakeup that banning Violent Outburst wasn't absolutely necessary. But then again, I don't sit on the B&R team. I don't look at the math on everything, but I am a big Modern player as far as a competitive aspect. I don't play a ton at the smaller events here at the shop on our weekly events and stuff like that, but I do tend to play and keep track of the meta pretty hard. Their reasoning was, and I'm going to pull it up while I paraphrase it, is that basically Rhino's decks got to the level of red black scam. So I don't really agree with that, especially because they really let Fury and Beanstalk stick around for so long, and that's what they kind of compared it to. They compared the Leyline of the Guild pack, Sign of Draco package being in Rhinos, the reason that Rhinos was so good, whereas, in my honest opinion, that package is better in just the Zoo deck and not the Rhinos variant. Just because of how the decks differ as far as their play style and whatnot. The one thing that it does really highlight, though, is the play line that Violent Outburst gives versus cards like Ardent Plea or Shardless Agent or Demonic Dread. Demonic Dread being absolutely the worst one of the three because it has to have a target, so it makes things a little weird. But the fact that Violent Outburst was the only one that was instant speed, so you could play it on your opponent's end step, thus giving you the opportunity to use a Force Negation if you had one in your hand, and then untap and have access to, at minimum, 8 power, was a little good. That being said, there's tons of interaction for both the Violent Outburst, Cascade Trigger, and the Rhinos once they're on the table, and a lot of things. I mean, the Rhinos deck has basically been a deck in like a tier 1 deck, or at least a tier 1.5 deck since the printing of Shardless Agent into Modern. And I think that even with the ban of Violent Outburst, that's not going to change. We're still going to have a deck with Rhinos, and it's still going to be this semi-problematic deck. I think that the bigger hit here is Living End. I think Living End decks being forced to play either Demonic Dread or Ardent Plea to replace Outburst is very problematic because of the way that the deck works. You basically have to walk your deck into a board wipe, which, not to say that that's not a bad thing as far as keeping the deck, its power level in check, but it's a lot more difficult to survive just the effectiveness of the deck that way, because it takes so much more build up in order for it to be profitable to cascade into a living end. So there's that. Yeah, I think that Modern Horizons 3, with what we've seen and the power level and the adjustments, and we've already seen a couple of reprints or pseudo-functional reprints with Priestess Titania getting reprinted, which in my opinion is not going to do a whole lot. I'd love to see Elves come back. That's pyroclasm fodder. Like, that's... Weenie creatures decks don't tend to really live a long life in Modern. I am still shocked with how many numbers Yawgmoth puts up, just because it's this go wide-esque strategy and a creature-based combo deck, and it's not just getting absolutely thrashed, but I play Tron. I eat Yawgmoth players alive. I don't. It is what it is. You have to be a pretty good Yawgmoth player to pull the wool over my eyes while I'm on Tron. Shout out to Eli Loveman at Denver, who cashed my check. This damn close, though. So there's that. And then you have a lot of functional reprints. Psychofrog just being an insanely power-crept version of Psychotog and whatnot. So I do think that the B&R announcement today was a little bit ahead of schedule. I honestly think that they could have or should have just let Modern ride itself out through Thunder Junction into Modern Horizons 3 and then made an adjustment to Modern, especially with the fact that Modern doesn't have a RCQ season until well on until the end of the year. It does have Pro Tour Modern Horizons 3, but I think that Pro Tour Modern Horizons 3, with the playability of everything that it's going to come out of Thunder Junction and then out of Moho 3, would have kind of adjusted or policed itself with Outburst still being in the format. That's my honest opinion, though. So yeah. If you haven't seen, most of the decks are already shooting into the ranks of playing Ardent Plea. Is Teamer Rhinos really going to be an adjustable playable deck? Probably not. You're going to see the decks move more towards Bant. I think Bant is not going to be as problematic for the format, because now you have to play 4 colors at minimum if you still want access to Fire and Ice, if you still want access to Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon post board. So are you going to play this like Bant version of Rhinos that leans more on Teferi and other interactions and whatnot? There's not as many good split card interactions. It's going to lean harder on Tashana's Tidebinders, Subtlety, Solitude, stuff like that. Is it going to be as good? Probably not. I think that the only version of Rhinos that really stands the test of time with this banning happening is the Rainbow Rhinos build that's leaning on the back of Scion and Leyline of the Guild Pact. That version probably is just able to swap its Violent Outbursts for Ardent Pleas and adjust its mana base so that if it doesn't have a Leyline on table in the opening hand, it can fetch correctly in order to hit the colors that it needs when it needs them. So there's that. I think it does push a lot of the Rainbow Rhinos players into the domain list. And it does push, like I said, it does push Living End basically out of the format, in my opinion. I think it becomes too restrictive in the casting cost of colors. You need so many black spells in order to make sure your grief is good. Your grief and your Architect of Wills have to be just heaters when you cascade into Ardent Plea or you cascade into Shardless Agent in order to make sure that they clear any kind of board wipe that's going to happen. But I think a lot of the Living End players are going to shimmy away from playing the deck in that regard. This also might be a situation where you see more As Foretold style builds come out of the woodwork as far as ways to cast Footfalls and play Cascade decks, which was a strategy before Footfalls really became a printed card and people were cascading into other 0-drops. Between Restore Balance and Living End, there were these mono blue builds that were using As Foretold as your way to cast your Footfall, or not your Footfalls, but your Restore Balance and your Living End. I could see possibly the Teamer Rhinos list going to some number of Ardent Pleas and splashing a 4th color in order to cast it, and then, but some of them possibly running off the back of As Foretold and just leaning harder into playing almost like a Blue Moon style free cast if you draw it. That way it's not as problematic if you draw it and it's in your hand style of Rhinos. So yeah, that's the B&R announcement for Modern. Real quick, we'll talk on Vintage. If you're not interested in Vintage, here's where you can thumbs up, thumbs down, click the video off, whatever you want to do. Ponder being unrestricted in Vintage, I think, is going to have a huge impact on the format. When you look at the list of high-end, powerful cantrips in the realm of Ponder, Preordering, Brainstorm, and then, like, they're so good in the format because of what happens and what's done and how turns are won and how turns play out and everything like that. And basically you just hold all the blue decks that are already packing a full set of Force Wills and some number of Force Negations. You got 3 more cantrips to set your combo up or your lock up or whatever you've got going on, whatever kind of situation that you're trying to figure out. You've got 3 more cards to help set up that, and then also 3 more copies to pitch to forces. I think that's going to end up being too good. Like, I understand that, again, outside of Eternal Weekend and things like Buffalo Chicken Dip and Oklahoma City Land Run and things of that sort, there's not a ton of Vintage that gets played, whether it's in paper or whether it's digital. It's just how it goes. And I get that. And I understand that a lot of you guys watching this are going to be like, well, I don't remember the last time that I played Vintage. Cool. That's fine. I do. I remember playing Vintage in Chicago. Was there a ton of people in the Vintage event? No. Granted, there was not a ton of people in events, period, in Chicago. MagicCon was very much a convention and very little a player activity. But as far as side events that fire, or semi-main events, or team trios events and stuff like that fire for these companies like Star City and NRG and Hyrule and Laughing Dragon and Card Titan and all these companies that run events that are not Magic the Gathering and WotC and Hasbro, there are significantly more Vintage events and side events that fire for those, and then also events like Buffalo Chicken Dip and Oklahoma City Land Run that are proxy-friendly events that are at the high end. Vintage, while it is very expensive to get into, it is a format of the game that does get play. That being said, I think that Ponder being unrestricted is going to end up being very, very good. Now, everybody kind of looked at Preordain in Modern, and when it got unbanned, and, oh, this is going to be a problem, or, oh, this is going to make combo decks just too good. I think that time has told that that's not the case. I think it's going to be different, though, for Vintage. Just because I've seen how those types of cantrips work in such a small vacuum of lands and then cards to help you win the game and then all upside in power level. So I think it's going to have a big impact on the format, bigger than what a couple of people expect. And by a couple of people, I mean the people on the B&R team that kind of looked at Vintage and thought that Ponder being unrestricted would be okay. Like I said, time will tell, and I could be eating my words in a couple of months or a year or however long it takes. But I think there's a reason why Ponder was restricted since 2008, and nobody has looked at possibly unbanning it. And or not unbanning it, but unrestricting it and letting players have more than one copy in their deck. Yeah, that covers Vintage in the small quantity that I think that Vintage, the limited amount of Vintage players that will watch this video will understand it. If you play Vintage and you have an opinion on it, put it in the comments and we'll talk back and forth about it. I'm pretty good about looking over at the comments once every other day or once a day when I come into work. I'll click over and see if I have new comments on anything that I've put up. As far as Modern, if you have an opinion on Modern, I'd love to hear it. Also, I'm going to try to figure out, again, what kind of scheduling that I can do to sit Bossman down in the office here with me and thwart some sort of live Q&A about the business and whatnot, Magic to a minimum. That being said, I am going to pull some orders and go home and take some more allergy medicine because I sound like shit and I feel like shit. So I will see you guys in the next video.